Journal 19. Every family has secrets, but there are two sides to every story. For years, the icy rift between my mother and her family haunted me. It was like a puzzle I needed to solve. I just couldn't shake my curiosity. I felt I had to investigate what caused my mother's family to turn their backs on her. So one day, I set out on a mission to find out, and my first stop was at my grandmother's house. However, the moment I arrived on her doorstep, a part of me wanted to turn around and leave, but before I could, the door swung open. Instantly, I was greeted by the look of surprise on my grandmother's face. Seconds passed as she stood frozen in time. The look on her face wasn't warmth, it was wariness that eventually faded to a weak smile. But honestly, she was never too happy to see me. I mean, things weren't ever the same after the coat incident. Sadly, instead of asking me my side of the story, I was branded a thief. He didn't even try to investigate. But apparently, every adult in my family was under the preconceived notion that the children came into the world with pre-installed manners that needed little to no parental intervention. For them, that made life easier, and when a child messed up, it was their own fault. And at that point, all the adult had to do was label that child a reject and complain about them. Once inside, I sat on a nearby sofa, thinking about the next generation after me. By that time, Diamond had several children by Nick, and I was concerned about how they would be impacted by all the treachery. A few seconds went by before I could begin my line of questioning, my subconscious at the ready with a notepad and pencil. But after my first question, I knew I wasn't going to get very far. I asked what was the cause of the rivalry between my mom and her sister. She paused, stunned by my inquiry. After a few seconds, she collected herself and replied, "Erica, you need to leave the past alone and move on with your life." I replied, "It's just a question, I just don't understand why." But before I could finish, she cut me off. "Leave it alone, Erica," she shouted. I was taken aback by the sharpness in her tone. It made me flinch. It was clear she didn't like me questioning the family dynamic. My eyes shifted away. The hardness in her face was a sign that it was time to leave. Even though I just got there, I didn't feel welcome. So from there, I stood to my feet and headed for the door, completely unaware that her face had softened and her arm was reaching for me. But before she could say a word, I was out the door. And the moment I stepped outside, I noticed dark storm clouds rolling in. It mirrored the turbulence I felt inside. Meanwhile, just a few miles away, Nick and his family were sitting in the living room watching TV about the approaching storm. The news anchor stated that a tornado may touch down and that those in the area should take cover, and that's when Diamond glanced at Nick with worried eyes. Instantly, everyone jumped to their feet and rushed to the basement, but Nick noticed something wasn't right and asked, "Where's the baby?" That's when Diamond shouted, "Oh my God, the baby's upstairs." Apparently, in the midst of all the commotion, it slipped their mind that their baby girl was upstairs strapped to a car seat, oblivious to the impending danger. And that's when Nick sprung into action. He rushed up 2 flights of stairs to the top floor of the house and grabbed the car seat, and with the speed of lightning shot back down to the basement. Thankfully, the tornado passed by their house. Journal 20. People say family isn't a choice, yet in this one, it often felt like it was. Over the years, much like a country club, new members were added, and depending on their status, beauty, or usefulness, they were either accepted with open arms or quietly rejected. That was the status quo, and it continued even after Linda had kids. She continued to blur the lines by teaching her kids to refer to my brother as Uncle Nick, deliberately ignoring the title of cousin. And of course, Nick considered the deception harmless. I mean, it was like birthrights could be swapped at will, as if God's natural order was merely a suggestion in this family. That's when I began to realize very early on that I was living among the godless. The longer it continued, the clearer it became. I remember the day I told my friend about it. Shortly after they invited me to their church, I went out of curiosity just to see what it was like. What I found was unlike anything I'd known at home. It was a place where heart games weren't allowed. The people were different in the spirit. They were kind, respectful, patient, and careful with their words and their actions toward one another. It felt like stepping into another world. It felt like home. But because of how broken my real home was, I didn't let myself get too comfortable. I wanted to stay, to grow spiritually, but there was this darkness inside me that I couldn't escape. It coursed through my veins like poison, an unwanted gift from my family, a permanent and painful snake bite that never healed. In my mind, there was no doubt my family was a stumbling block between me and God. That realization eventually pushed me away from the church, even though my heart longed for it. Not long after, Nick met a woman named Pam. At first, they were just friends, but over time, their friendship evolved into something more. At that point, Nick's secret affair made his life more complicated, but that didn't stop him from volunteering to play the enforcer in my life. He'd chase me out of the house for not cleaning up, over and over again. It became a vicious cycle. I was labeled lazy, and that word stuck. I couldn't refute it because if I tried, it would just fall on deaf ears. So they had the world believing that's who I was. And being chased out the house nearly every other day wasn't going to motivate me in the slightest. It just didn't make sense to me how deceived Nick was into thinking I was so stubbornly lazy that I would rather walk the streets for hours as opposed to simply cleaning up the house. But I digress. As I ventured outdoors with no real destination, I carried the weight of my father's words with me. He was the only one who told me the truth. And when I asked about the past, he didn't give it a second thought, he just told me. He explained that favoritism was part of it, but it went deeper. He said it happened during her childhood, but reached its peak back in 1972, a time of bold colors, bell-bottoms, disco lights, and smoky jukebox bars. Back then, my mother was at the height of her youth and beauty. She and my father were still married, though separated, both living in two different cities. Their hearts were never far from each other. And Dad claimed the distance was what kept their marriage together. Mom was living the life many would envy. She leased a condo with an Olympic-sized pool, dressed in stylish clothes, and wore her makeup like armor. But when she returned to visit family, that's when jealousy crept in. My Aunt Helen, harboring her own quiet bitterness, had her eyes on a man who couldn't help but notice my mother. That envy poisoned her. One evening, after a long night of partying, they arrived at Mom's home drunk, so drunk that Mom passed out, and Aunt Helen seized the moment. From her purse, she pulled out a tattoo gun and carved the words, "Lost Soul," onto my mother's head. When Mom woke and saw what had been done, she snapped. She smashed a bottle and cut Helen's arm badly enough to need stitches. But when the story reached my grandmother, it was Helen's version that prevailed. Mom was branded as dangerous, unstable, and blackballed from her own family without a second thought. No one wanted to hear her side. That destroyed her. Something in her broke that night, and from then on, she stopped believing in the power of truth. In her mind, deception reigned supreme. That's where the cycle began. And in time, lies became her armor, manipulation her weapon, and her makeup was a mask. So I guess what they say is true, hurt people really do hurt people.